I'm joined here by Katharine Anderson from the Center for Investigative Reporting, and we are pleased to welcome you to a joint webinar on our experiences and some readiness tips about CRM. And I'm hoping that you can all see and hear, and this session is also being recorded for archival purposes so that others can watch later on. So just so you know, we are going to each talk for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we will reserve the rest of the time for Q&A. And at that point, you can type into your questions in the chat box to your right, or you can raise your hand using the little hand signal, and we can call on you and you can ask your questions live, which will be recorded. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Katharine, can you turn the controls over to me?
Yes, I can. Here you go. So there you go.
Okay. I'm hoping that you can see my cover slide. Katharine, are you seeing it?
I am, yes.
Great. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. So there you are. There's my mugshot and my title and my email address. The first thing I wanted to talk about, since this is a joint webinar for both online news organizations and for public broadcasting stations, it's just a really quick word about why we're doing this together. And I am very pleased to be a guest on this webinar at the invitation of Joaquin Alvarado of CIR, who is an outgoing member of the Greater Public Board of Directors. And he invited me to be part of this because he thinks that where CRM is concerned, our two sub-industries have a lot that we can learn from each other. So it seemed to make sense to share war stories and experiences and recommendations together. And I thought, just as a place to start, we might want to start talking about really quickly, how different are we in terms of public broadcasting versus online news organizations? And one of the things that has been so interesting to me in talking to Katharine is to find out just how similar we are, which I didn't realize. Of course, some obvious similarities, but I didn't realize from a fundraising perspective that we have exactly the same funding model. So both online news organizations and public broadcasting stations have membership programs, which really is the term that we all use to refer to annual gifts of $1,000 and below. We all generally mark the dividing line between membership and major gifts at $1,000, which is significant from a CRM perspective because the type of data that gets tracked changes at that point. Our organizations all rely on corporate underwriting, which follows very similar guidelines. At foundation grants and subsidies. So we have exactly the same funding model. We also use exactly the same tools for engagement, including volunteers, events, newsletters, websites, mobile apps, social media, and so forth. I'm going to take my screen to full screen here. Sorry, didn't mean to make you look at my notes there. As news organizations, we may also share some of the same concerns about access to data. What we find on the public broadcasting side, for instance, is that development departments are very concerned about restricting access to donor financial information, their actual gift amounts, and don't want that shared throughout the organization, whereas news departments may be collecting data about newsletter subscribers, for instance, and don't like the idea of sharing that data with development because they're worried perhaps that people might be asked for money in an inappropriate way when what they did was signed up for a content newsletter. So there's some similar concerns, perhaps, about data access. Where we are really different, where, again, from a CRM perspective, is in on-air fundraising, which is a relatively minor thing, but there are some unique CRM considerations related to the on-air membership drives that we do on the public broadcasting side. Another distinction where that is concerned has to do with how public broadcasting stations use on-air drives as a major acquisition tool. It's one of the primary sources of member acquisition in public broadcasting, along with direct mail. Much more centralized than on the online news side, my understanding. Excuse me. And part of what that means is that, in my opinion, public broadcasting stations, because they have that outlet for, or inlet perhaps, for donor acquisition. I think on the public broadcasting side, we have put less priority on certain types of data gathering before membership begins than perhaps online news organizations have. And so from that perspective, we might have a little bit more to learn on the CRM side than online news organizations. But in general, we're very, very similar. So just very, very quickly, what is the promise of CRM? And if you're sitting in on this webinar, presumably you know at least enough about that to have some sense of why you're interested and what kind of opportunities you think that it presents. But very, very quickly, since we're nonprofit organizations, of course our ultimate goal is better public service. And CRM is a major tool to help us get there because it collects analytics across different departments. So instead of data silos, in this department, that department, the other department, there would be the ability to collect data across the entire enterprise and use that to build a deeper relationship with constituents. From a fundraising perspective, one of the real promises of CRM is the ability to start collecting major giving level intelligence at a much earlier point in the relationship, in fact, before the first gift is made. And that's very important. If you think about what kinds of data get collected once an individual is on the major giving radar screen, everything changes, doesn't it? It stops becoming sort of a game of numbers and much more about personal interests and personal capacity and the level of engagement that that person has with the organization. This is now information through CRM that could start to be collected much earlier on in the relationship. In addition to tracking things like relationships among constituents, which is another type of data gathering. I'm so sorry that this keeps coming up. Another type of data gathering that in our current systems generally happens once somebody is a major giving prospect. Moving on again, this is a fundraising perspective. A digital crowd would have a different perspective on a lot of this. But from a fundraising perspective, the goal is loyal support. And the idea is that all of this information that you're able to collect through CRM about your constituents, not just their giving histories, but their event attendance, their activity on your social media platforms, what they're doing with you online, that all of that information can become true intelligence that will enable you to personalize the experience and personalize the fundraising solicitations to increase the lifetime value of a member all the way up through planned giving. There's also, of course, a huge promise for CRM from a backroom perspective. And I'm a COO, so the backroom is important to me, and that's something that I'm watching closely. And excuse me, there are a number of things that a more enterprise-wide system can enable us to do. And one is what I'm calling abolish the data priesthood, which is to say that idea that there's a data guru, maybe just one or two people that are the only ones that really know how to manipulate the data and have access to the data. And that creates not only bottlenecks from the standpoint of process, but it also means that, he or she who has information has power, right? The idea of CRM is that data becomes democratized. We heard one panelist at our conference this last summer summarize it as data wants to be free. So that the idea is that more people will be able to have access to the data that they need rather than having to go through a single point of collection or a single point of analysis. Another big part of the promise, this is something near and dear to my heart at our own organization, is reducing the amount of data entry needed. That if you can have systems that talk to each other and pull centralized data into one big system, that there's a much reduced need for data entry, which is especially important for those of us, I think, with small staff. And the third idea is that there's greater accuracy of the data, that by having the data not need to touch so many human hands, fewer things will fall through the cracks. And some data will start being collected in digital form that maybe is now being handwritten or living in somebody's head.
Hey, Deborah.
So there's a lot of benefits from the backroom. Yes, Katharine?
I don't want to interrupt, but two things. One is that Elizabeth Hovance suggested selecting the bottom option on that pop-up so that it won't show up anymore. Thank you, Elizabeth. And secondly, did you want to do the poll at some point?
I think we'll skip the poll for now, but
Okay.
thanks, Elizabeth, and I will click that bottom thing. Sorry, I'm just going so fast. I'm just trying to get it out of my face, but I will do that the next time it comes through.
Okay, great.
Okay, so moving on. So why am I prioritizing CRM? And I have two really good reasons for that. And one is that as a senior staff and as a board of directors, Greater Public has decided that this is an institutional priority. So this is something that you can count on us, those of you who are working in public broadcasting can count on us watching more closely and providing more services around, because we do see this as such a tremendous opportunity for the system. The other one is very close to home, and it's what I call our cobbler's children's secret, which is the fact that we really need this badly as an organization ourselves. Okay, Elizabeth, I got it that time. Thanks for the reminder. And here's a depiction of our current database. This is our database. This is our guilty secret. I'm pulling the curtain back and talking a little bit about the backroom operations here at Greater Public. We have a perfectly robust database that we are using to do a lot of things that it was never designed to do. And we're just on system overload, and some of you may be able to relate to this strongly. It's not that the database itself is flawed, it's that we're cramming it full of all sorts of data for things that it was not originally designed to hold. So we've repurposed fields, we've created an arcane coding system, which just exacerbates the problem of that data guru, because it's not intuitively obvious where things live or how to get at it. Our data is clean because we believe really strongly in the garbage in, garbage out principle. So our data is clean, but it is very difficult to access, and it's clearly not a sustainable system. Also, from our standpoint, we're a virtual office, and so having a cloud-based system was very important to us. So two key projects have consumed me for the last 6 months, and a lot of what I'm talking about today I have learned through these two projects. And the first one was our participation along with IMA, the Integrated Media Association, in the production of a substantial research report, about 116 pages, called The Consumer's Guide to CRM Systems for Public Media, in which we worked with a third party, Idealware, which is an independent research organization, to do independent product reviews of 9 CRM systems. We wanted to make sure that public broadcasting stations understood that they have choices where CRM platforms are concerned, but we also wanted to narrow those choices to a select group that really could be compared to each other and that we felt would be viable solutions for a public broadcasting station. As part of doing that product review, we conducted the first phase of the research ourselves. This is something that would normally have been done by the research firm. We put together a universal needs requirement document for public broadcasting stations. We tried to take into consideration both large stations, small stations, different formats, different licensee types, but to try to come up with, and this is really for the benefit of the researchers, to come up with a universal needs requirement document. The resulting document, which is an appendix in that report, is about, I don't know, 175 line items long. And it covers the software needs for the departments that you see listed here, from membership all the way through to email marketing and systems integration. This was a massive undertaking, and it ended up, from our standpoint, in terms of our own learning, to be one of the most valuable pieces of that entire project. We learned an awful lot. Most of you, I think, will, from the public broadcasting side, know that in fact our two organizations, Greater Public and IMA, announced a merger last week, and this project played no small part in that decision, because we could really see the benefits of cross-department thinking in bringing together kind of the digital side of the house and the fundraising side of the house and some other different perspectives to really do some thinking on behalf of potential and needs. The other major one is our own CRM. So we are in the process of converting to Salesforce ourselves, and our ecosystem of platforms includes a main database, which is just straight Salesforce for us, an event management platform, a marketing automation program, a webinar platform, and a Drupal website. And we hope to have all of our data imported by the end of this week. And next week, we will start going into the user acceptance phase. And then we will go live, begin staff training and go live. So this has been very much hands-on immersion for us in CRM. So we're right alongside of stations in really putting this into practice. And it's been a tremendous learning experience. For me as a COO, I am not a technology person. So it's been a real ordeal by fire for me. And I've learned so much. And there's a lot of things that I wish I had known when I had started, so I'm going to share some of that with you today. So here's a COO's perspective. This is what I want to talk about today. Understanding what a CRM platform is and isn't. That was an enormous aha moment for me, actually not in our own conversion, but in the Idealware project. A few insights about setting priorities, documenting the truly critical processes, and understanding a few things about integration and pricing models. Katharine's going to follow me with a much more detailed case study of her particular organization. I'm going to try to stick mostly to some general principles that I think other organizations might be able to implement. Okay, so this seems really obvious. It turns out not to be as obvious as you might think. What is the CRM platform? The CRM platform is the database that houses the top line information from your CRM ecosystem. And I'm saying ecosystem because every vendor will tell you that their platform will do it all. And I'm here to tell you that it won't. It may do parts of what you need, but it's not going to do absolutely everything that you need. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. So you are looking at an ecosystem. What we call the CRM platform is that central database that will keep at least the top line information all in one place, but it's not ever going to be everything that you need. Here was the eureka moment for me in the Idealware platform, the Idealware product review. So we were putting together the needs requirement document. As I said, it's quite lengthy and very detailed. I'll show you a little excerpt from it in a moment. And at one point, the researchers said, you know, you are looking for the Holy Grail. And we said, what do you mean? And they said, well, you're really looking for a state-of-the-art donor management system housed within a CRM. And those are actually two different types of systems. And that was such a shocker to us because we didn't realize that what we were looking for was something that unusual. And they explained a CRM system is designed to be very shallow and broad. A donor management system is intended to be narrow and deep. You're looking for both, and that is very, very difficult to find. So here's a quote. This is actually appears in the Idealware report. You can use a shallow net and catch a lot of fish, or deep net to catch those big guys lurking at the bottom. That is a strategic decision that's going to come up a couple of times in the CRM selection process and also in the configuration of your CRM platform. And that, to me, was really, really an important moment of understanding that what we're really after is something that's both broad and deep, and that takes some customization to be able to achieve. Here is a small excerpt from one page of the needs requirements document. I'll just let you take a quick look at it here if you haven't already seen it. This is the level of detail that is needed for a needs requirement document. Obviously, the scale over to the right is not important to you because you'll only be worried about your own organization, not about all stations. But I wanted to draw your attention to the scale at the bottom of the page. That was very important and a very, very difficult exercise for us to go through. And of course, we were trying to go through it on behalf of all of the stations in the system. But that ability to rank, that necessity of ranking what's truly important versus what will be good in the future is one of the most important pieces of all of this. So it's not enough just to list all the things that you want this to do. That ranking process is incredibly important because that's where you really learn where the rubber hits the road. And especially I want you to take a look at that number 4 at the bottom. It's not just very important, it's that we cannot effectively function without this. And it is incredibly important for you to know which items on your own list get that number 4 ranking, because that's where you're going to want to begin. So that cannot effectively function without this. You know, what literally keeps your train on the tracks? For most public broadcasting stations, that's going to be membership. In our particular case at Greater Public, we're not a fundraising organization, so fundraising was not our key thing. For us, it was the ability to segment for communications purposes because information is our product. And so for us, the absolute bottom line was accurate segmentation, including multi-level queries, the sorts of things that are our daily bread and butter. But you need to know what are the most critical bread and butter activities at your organization in some detail. It's not just enough to say membership. What are those 3 to 5 reports or those 3 to 5 multi-level queries that enable your mail to get out every month, or whatever it is? What are those things that you literally, your membership function literally cannot operate without? You need to document that information in as much detail as you can. I would suggest before you start talking to vendors, because we have heard more than one horror story of early adopters of CRM discovering after they had begun to implement CRM that their platform actually literally could not pull some of the data that they were going to need on a daily or weekly or monthly basis. You need to know exactly what those functions are. And I would suggest the earlier in the process, the better. Bring it to vendor demos. A really useful tool in that process that we use all the time working with our implementation consultants, and if I had known about this ahead of time, I would have started to write these up before we even selected a consultant. And that is the creation of use cases. And these are little scenarios, little vignettes that represent information needs that you have from whatever departments. I suggest that you write them in as plain English as you possibly can, and that you focus on the information you need, not on the process, because in a different platform, the process may be very, very different. But you need to know exactly what information you need in order to be able to use that in your fundraising or whatever your key functions are. And the use cases can represent a really common occurrence, or they can represent some sort of rare instance that's still very important to be able to accommodate, or it may be something on your wish list for the future. But it really, really helps your process of configuring your CRM system, and in fact, even selecting the right CRM system, if you can write up those little vignettes. And I'm just going to show you a couple from here from our own organization. Obviously, we run a different type of operation than a station does, but I thought you might find it useful to see some illustrations. So here's an example of one we just recently gave to our implementation consultant. I'll just give you a moment to read that. So that's the kind of detail that our implementation consultant who's helping us configure Salesforce has found extremely helpful. And again, we're trying to focus on what we want to know rather than the process, because it turns out that the process is quite different from what we've done in the past. But having this level of detail is helpful. And again, I would suggest that if you have not yet selected a platform, having some of your wish list or some of your key functions described in use cases would be very, very helpful before you've even selected a platform. Here's another one. We have a complicated little industry, and in our own database, we find that any one individual at a station might have up to 4 perfectly valid email addresses. Since we want to be able to use email addresses as unique identifiers for pre-populating forms, it's very important that the system be able to recognize any of those 4 email addresses, it's usually no more than 4, as being the same person. So this is another example of the level of specificity that is helpful when you're configuring your system in the first place. And as I say, I think the earlier the better for writing this kind of thing up. So with that information, if you've gone through your needs requirements process, And if you have access to that Idealware report that I was just referring to, if you're from one of our member stations, you will have access to that. By all means, use that as a starting place for creating your own needs requirements document. Once you've got that, you've ranked those items in your needs requirements document, and you've done some use case scenarios. Now you're really well armed to select a system or to explore options with an implementation consultant. And there's an entire cottage industry of implementation consultants, as I'm sure you know, and it's highly recommended. You have a couple of key strategic decisions to make, and this is related to what I was saying earlier about broad and shallow versus narrow and deep. So you can either, depending on how well the systems available to you can do all of those things at once, you can choose to go with a very powerful broad CRM and customize it where necessary to get the depth that you need. That's going to be expensive, but it can be very effective. Or you can make integratability a key priority and choose a CRM. Salesforce is an example, but it's not the only one. Choose a CRM that is known for its ability to integrate with other highly specialized tools. So you get the depth that you'll need through the specialized tool, but you'll get some of the benefits of that broad CRM by integrating the two together. Or you can start from exactly the opposite direction, which is start with a highly specialized platform, let's say a membership management system, and add CRM functionality as you can. And in fact, many of the donor management systems are doing that for you and starting to add more modules for events or for email marketing or other related types of things. Maybe 2 or 3 of the platforms that we reviewed in our Idealware project fell into that category. So you can really go at it from either direction, but just know that you will be trying to do 2 things at once, that wide net and the deep net. And you will have to make some strategic decisions about how you achieve that. And it's just best to know that going in. Just a couple of words about integration. This is a place where I was extremely naive with our own CRM implementation. I thought that integration was really about configuration. Oh, I have this platform here and here's Salesforce. I'll just pay to have this configured and then the two will talk to each other and we'll be done with it. That may be just a reflection of how I am not a technology person, but it turns out, in case you're in my boat, integration is about functionality and not just configuration. And it's an ongoing cost because it's a set of functions. You're talking about perhaps embedding one product within the environment of another product. And that is going to be really a different tool in many ways. And so you will pay for that on an ongoing basis. The platforms that we're integrating together, for instance, we're finding that there's going to be an additional annual cost of about $2,500 for each of those platforms to be integrated within the Salesforce environment. Your mileage may vary, depends on the pricing model, but that's what we're finding with our platforms. I was not expecting that. So that was an education for me. The other really interesting thing that we've just discovered is that sometimes the functionality may actually be reduced if one platform is integrated into another, which I was not expecting. For instance, our email marketing, our marketing automation platform that we're converting to, will actually live within our Salesforce instance, but we will lose a couple of pieces of functionality when that happens. We've found workarounds. We think it's still worth it because it will save us on data entry and a few other things. But just ask a lot of questions about integration and what that really means, because I had just assumed that integration meant more functionality, and sometimes that's not the case. And my last thing is about cost. Expect sticker shock. You know this. But I think it's easy to forget that you're not comparing to the cost of a donor database. You're comparing to the cost of a number of different systems that either you have or that you perhaps should have. So it's not going to be a direct comparison. Make sure you're comparing apples to apples. If you are talking about an entire ecosystem, you need to compare that to the cost of the current ecosystem you have now, not the donor database cost that you have now. Easy to forget that. And remember that when you're decentralizing the data now across departments, that means you're going to have many more registered users and potential for many more individual records, because you're going to be collecting information on constituents before they become members in ways that perhaps you haven't before. Most pricing models for CRM systems are based on either number of users or number of records or both, and you just need to remember that you're going to have a lot more of both. So as an example, one station that we know of, quite a large station, originally had, I think, 12 user licenses from their original donor database. Once they went to a station-wide CRM system, that exploded to 120 registered users. So that's a big change, and if your pricing model is based on number of users, you just need to expect that. But you also don't have to do all of this at once. And a phased approach is absolutely acceptable. In fact, I've heard more than one CRM consultant strongly recommend that you not try to do it all at once. Pick a place to start. Pick a CRM platform that has the capability for expansion, and do it over time based on your organization's capacity to absorb change. And that's what's happening in our organization. We're integrating about 3 of our 5 or 6 platforms. That's about how much I think we can stand to have all blown up at the same moment before we all go insane. Once we've gotten those under our belts, we'll integrate the others. But that's also a way to manage the costs a little bit better as well. A couple of really terrific resources that I've found both in researching CRM for the system and in working on our own CRM implementation can be found here. One is a group called Heller Consulting. That's one of the leading CRM implementation agencies. Keith Heller spoke at our conference this last summer, and we thought he was pretty terrific. And he's written a number of, actually their team has written a number of resources that are available at that website, especially that one called CRM Insights. And then Idealware, who are our partners on the platform review, have a wealth of free resources on their website related to CRM. Just do a search on CRM, and you'll be able to find them. Highly, highly recommend both of those sources. So that's the end of what I'm going to share with you at this point. Jeannie Erickson, who was my partner in crime on the Idealware project, is also on this call and would be happy to help take questions at the end. Here's contact information, and we hope you'll reach out to us with any questions that you have, or just to share your own stories on the public broadcasting side or on the online news organization side. We would love to hear from you. And now I'm going to turn back over to Katharine for a case study. There you go, Katharine.
Hello. Hi, everybody. My name is Katharine Anderson. I am the Manager of Data and Analytics at the Center for Investigative Reporting, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Sorry about that. There we go. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background about who I am. I got my BA from UC Berkeley, and I've been working in CRMs and donor databases and all of that fun stuff for about 4 years. So my first database was a Microsoft Access database that I was working on as an administrator for a campaign. And so I started out just doing data entry and eventually learning more and more about databases to the point where I created my own for a different campaign. My previous position was the operations analyst at the Base Citizen, and with them I also helped to really increase their functionality of their Salesforce database. And so a lot of my experience is with Salesforce CRM specifically. So a lot of this is going to be around Salesforce, but I think a lot of these lessons are applicable to whichever CRM you choose to use. I am currently working at the Center for Investigative Reporting, and about a year ago in May 2012, the Center for Investigative Reporting and the Base Citizen merged. So I've been working at CIR since then. So CIR is a nonprofit journalism organization. We do really in-depth long form and investigative pieces, which we then distribute out to different news organizations around the country. And as it says in our little mission statement there, what drives our work isn't profit, it's really impact. And from a database perspective, I think that that's really important to be aware of while we are going through and creating our new CRM, is that what we're trying to drive our constituents towards is creating impact in the world, not necessarily just towards giving us more money or towards coming to our events or whatever. So I think that that's very interesting. So at the point of the merger, CIR and the Bay Citizen still had two separate donor management systems. CIR was using Razor's Edge, and the Bay Citizen was using Salesforce. And so in May 2013, we did decide to consolidate into a single site and a single brand from the three that CIR was running: CIR, California Watch, and the Bay Citizen. So that does make things slightly simpler from a donor database perspective or a CRM perspective. But knowing that we may decide to continue or to go back to a multi-brand system, we are looking to have that as one of our requirements for what we're doing with our CRM, because we want to make sure that we have that functionality if needed. So just a quick view at our timeline. As I said, the Bay Citizen and CIR merged in May 2012. And shortly after that, we started creating our business requirements document to look at all of the aspects of our business that we're going to need to capture in our CRM, and to look at, what types of reports we're going to need, what type of data we're going to need to capture, what is the level of detail that we're going to need, all of that kind of stuff. And we wanted to make sure that we were looking at it from a business needs perspective. What is it that what is it that we do on the business side, not what is it that the technology will do for us out of the box. And then we looked at a bunch of different vendors for all parts of this, not just our CRM, but like Deborah was talking about with their emailing service, or we have to be able to capture a bunch of our events and events registrations and webinars like the one that we're hosting right now, and other things like that. Then we looked at a bunch of different consulting partners and selected them, and then finally we started our implementation a few months ago. So we're still in the middle of it because it is very time consuming, but that is definitely in the works. So CIR's business needs. Now, this is a very, very high level statement that we created after going through the requirements process for a little while, to think about it from a, what is it that CIR really needs to get out of this? And because, like I said, we had two different donor management systems, one of the highest priorities was to make sure that we had all of our organizational data that is related to any aspect of our fundraising in one place, so that we could report on it, so that the system is effective, so that we would have accuracy, so that our constituent communications would make sense, and so that we could move people up our engagement funnel towards that impact and towards engagement with our organization and with our brands. So our requirements process was a lot simpler than the one that Deborah was outlining earlier, because we were looking at our organization specifically. But still, we had to do a lot of interviewing with our staff, with other stakeholders like our board members, with you know, other organizations that have built CRMs before. We did a lot of research by attending webinars, by talking on the phone, and over webinar with vendors, and doing a lot of online research of what is the technology that is available out there that will meet our needs. And so pretty early on, we did decide to keep Salesforce CRM as our organizational CRM moving forward. So last year in 2012, I and a few other of our staff members attended Dreamforce 2012, which is Salesforce's annual conference, so that we could learn as much as we could about the different abilities of Salesforce and the different options that are available to us. We also did online and in-person trainings. We joined the Salesforce nonprofits user groups and are attending those meetings. And I joined a LinkedIn Salesforce page for nonprofits specifically, to learn from other users about what they're doing and how they're using the using the page, or the CRM, sorry. So we did have a few takeaways from Dreamforce. It was a 4-day or 5-day conference, so there was a lot of information that we learned there. But one of the major things was about just making sure that when you are building your CRM, you're thinking about it from the business side. And sometimes when you're looking at the business processes that you're using, you may need to make some business changes. And so the business changes are actually harder than the technical changes, partially because the technical side is, changing code or changing buttons or, implementing a new service, whereas the business side is changing people and the way that they do work. And so you just need to make sure that you don't underestimate the amount of change that could be required there. So with our new CRM, with the new Salesforce CRM, we are going to be integrating with a lot of different systems, including our marketing system, events management, our donation/membership system, our payment processor. We are going to have something to help us clean up our data and maintain it and make sure that it's continually accurate. And we're also integrating with Wealth Engine, which helps us do major donor prospect research. And so because of all of that, it does make it very complicated because, like Deborah was saying, sometimes those integrations reduce functionality. And then also sometimes when you are integrating with multiple different systems, you want to make sure that you have a canonical source of data and that different systems aren't overwriting each other, and things like that. So next is how we selected our vendors. A lot of it was research on my account. I did a bunch of compare-contrast spreadsheets. I looked at reviews. Salesforce has an app exchange that does reviews from other users and from other customers. But most CRM systems that have apps, I think Oracle has something like this, where you can look up reviews for different apps or for different vendors or for different consulting partners or whatever else. So just know that that is a resource that is available to you. And we have an account rep with the Salesforce Foundation because we are a nonprofit. But if you are a for-profit, for instance, you can also get an account rep with the regular Salesforce organization, and they can help you sort through all of this and understand your options better. We also, did multiple personalized demos, asked a lot of questions, did test accounts to play with how these things, how each of our vendors is going to work, what specifically they are going to be doing for us, and all of that. And then, of course, interviews with current users. And so we did the same sort of process with our consultant and our consulting firm. But we wanted to make sure that we emphasized when we were looking for these people that they understand the nonprofit business model, because it is very different from a for-profit business model, that they had experience with implementing the tools that we had chosen, and that they had great reviews from previous clients, and that they had an understanding of and ability to express best practices, because we didn't want a consulting firm that would be yes men. We wanted somebody who would tell us what is the best way to actually accomplish these goals, because they will have had experience in doing it. And so our new email service provider is actually a marketing automation service. So we, had a little bit of that sticker shock, because marketing automation is much more robust and able to do a lot more things. But it is a lot more expensive than what we had been using, because we had been using a basic newsletter and emailing service. But it did have a lot closer integration with our CRM. It had improved segmentation. It made it so that we could send automated emails, which cuts down on staff time. And it also has a much increased tracking ability, so that we can understand what it is that our constituents are actually doing, which is great. And so just a few recommendations from me to you, if you are starting off on this CRM implementation, is that first, just take the time to do it right. Understand that all of these things take time: finding the vendors, finding a consultant, doing the implementation, making sure that the integrations work correctly. All of that, it takes time, and rushing at any particular point can cause it all to break down. So just be careful. Second is fairly early on in the process, it's probably a good idea to sit down and just make a list of the reports that you'll need. Lastly, the data migration is super time consuming, so be prepared for that. And I have a few additional resources here that are kind of Salesforce specific. First is top 10 questions to ask when choosing a Salesforce app. That is a very helpful resource that I had when I was looking for the different Salesforce apps that I was going to be using. And secondly, 20 questions for screening a CRM consultant. That also, I think, is very useful. So I'd recommend taking a look at those after the webinar is over. And we will be sending out our both this recorded webinar as well as our slides. And then lastly, this is a CRM requirements document survey that is in beta currently that we created. And so I'll just show that to you really quickly. When you come to this page, just sign up and put in a new password, and it will allow you to create an account. I'm just going to put in mine really quickly. And once you sign in, it will take you to this page where you can actually create a new relay worksheet, as we call them, and just name it your organization and select a worksheet type. When you select that, make sure to select Customer Relationship Management and say Create. And once you get to this page, it has a little requirements document plan that I put together. And if you want to take a look at this, it has some good steps and some good insights into how to go through the first steps in creating your business requirements document. And then on this side, we just have some fields that you can fill in to keep track of your responses to the ones on this side. So make sure to do that if you're interested. And once you click save, it will be saved. You can come back and edit it ad infinitum, however much you want. So thank you very much. Do we have any questions? I'm going to stop showing my screen. But if you have any questions, I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody. And I want to thank you all for attending. And Deborah, do you have anything to add?
The only thing I'll add in closing is that, both Katharine and we are on some version of Salesforce, but we really don't want this to seem like an advertisement for Salesforce. There are many different